After 25 years of studying innovation, here's what I have learned by Clayton M. Christensen, one of my favorite thinkers. This man is the owner of some of the best assemblage of neurons I've ever witnessed. So let's see what Professor Clayton Christensen has to say about innovation. It's been more than 25 years since I wrote my first book, The Innovator's Dilemma. I highly recommend it. Since that time, I've learned that the best answers to the enormous problems we are struggling with always starts with asking the right question. I've since written 11 other books and more magazine articles than I can count, but each has always started with my desire to answer a simple but perplexing question. The Innovator's Dilemma asked, why do great firms fail, especially at the hand of smaller and less resourced upstarts? The answer: disruptive innovations. These are innovations that are less expensive and poorer performing than existing products on the market. Disruptive innovations are often targeted at customers for whom products on the market are either too complicated or too expensive. The Innovator's Dilemma has helped entrepreneurs, managers, and investors understand how these upstarts could eventually upend their market. So far, I agree with everything Clayton is saying. More recently, I've asked what may be the most important question yet. Where does lasting prosperity come from? The answer: market-creating innovations. These are innovations that transform complicated and expensive products into products that are simple and affordable so that many more people in society can access them. In some cases, these innovations are disruptive, but in every case, the new markets that are created serve as a strong foundation for sustained economic growth. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to learn how to ask good questions from so many people: my family, my students at Harvard Business School, executives of major corporations, and presidents and prime ministers of nations. But the goal of asking questions is always to get to better answers. So I offer here some of the most important answers I found over my years of teaching to life's most challenging questions. Oh boy, this should be good. Mr. Christensen, Professor Christensen, should maybe dabble in marketing as well. Number one, not all innovation is created equal. The word innovation has become a buzzword routinely used to describe things that are new, shiny, feature-rich, and in some cases, breakthrough. While all those are certainly characteristics of innovations, they are less helpful than when trying to understand how companies and nations can organize themselves in ways that can truly foster growth. And so for clarity, I use this definition, the same one I used in my first book. Innovation is a change in the process by which an organization transforms labor, capital, materials, or information into products and services of greater value. The Robert Anton Wilson had a lovely term for this that really zips up the definition. Slack. This was before Slack, the company, was a gleam in its founder's eye. Robert Anton Wilson is a speaker that was active, I believe, starting in the 70s and perhaps through the 90s. So Slack, and I've never seen anyone else use Slack in this way, but the way Robert Anton Wilson had presented Slack It was presented as if this is a kind of slang word used perhaps in the 60s or 70s, somewhere in California. Slack to indicate creation of something out of nothing. If labor, capital, materials, and information is to be transformed into products or services of greater value, then certainly it has to start somewhere, and zero is the right point from which to start from. But of course, a momentary review of your capacity to labor, bring capital to the table, bring materials, information to the table, and then transform them into products or services of greater value, you immediately realize that nobody, none of us are starting from zero. We already have things, which is convenient if you are thinking about starting a business. Anyways, so I suppose Slack as a compressed, zipped up version of the definition could be used. Definition being, innovation is a change in the process by which an organization transforms labor, capital, materials, or information into products and services of greater value. Slack. Creation of something out of nothing. That definition helps us understand that, from an economic development standpoint, there are primary three types of innovation: market, creating, sustaining, and efficiency. Dear Professor goes into these things in many of his YouTube videos, which I highly recommend. I have a sense of where he's going with this, and efficiency is the kind of innovation that established companies engage in. Sustaining, certainly. Market creating is for startups. Let's see. Market creating innovations do exactly what the term implies. They create new markets, but these are not just any new markets. They are new markets that serve people for whom either no product existed or existing products were not accessible for a variety of reasons, including cost or the lack of expertise required for their use. In marketing terms, this is sometimes referred to as moving the free line. So there's a range of products that is charging for X. A new product comes on the market that capitalizes on the fact that it's a popular service or a product, but it's not available for free, and now it is. So moving the free line is a very popular way for products to enter the market. Market-creating innovations include transforming complicated and expensive products into ones that are so much more affordable and accessible to an increased number of consumers who are able to buy and use them. In some cases, such innovation can create entirely new product categories. For example, when Henry Ford developed the Ford Model T, he made the car simple and affordable for millions of Americans that so many people were able to buy the product. The new market Ford created led to many other markets that provided a solid foundation for growth and prosperity in America. About 100 years later, Sirius FM and satellite radio became a market. This is what the good professor is talking about. I read an interesting fact, I guess, supposedly. We don't really know what facts are anymore. But it was certainly presented as a fact. In Pennsylvania, and I think it was brought up because it might still be on the books, But around the time when Model T was being rolled out, there was a law on the books that a car driver, Model T driver, or any other car, would have to pull over by the side of the road, disassemble his vehicle so that the horse carriage can pass. I thought that was really interesting, and it shows how priorities and preferences and culture evolves over time. Anywho, sustaining innovations are improvements to existing products and services already on the market and are typically targeted at customers who require better performance. Alienware comes to mind immediately. A better laptop for discerning gamer who can't keep his food down in the presence of a Dell or a Gateway, God forbid. Or Windows and adaptive cruise control. These are all sustaining innovations. They are important for companies and their host countries to remain competitive. They have a very different impact on an economy than market-creating innovations. For instance, companies rarely need to build sales, distribution, marketing, and manufacturing engines when they develop sustaining innovations in a mature market because they are selling to an existing customer base from relatively known segment of the population using already developed channels. Car manufacturers being a perfect example of that, of course. Efficiency innovations enable companies to do more with fewer resources. Examples are outsourcing a firm's activities to take advantage of lower wages or using technology like automation to reduce cost. With efficiency innovations, companies can become more profitable and critically free up cash flow, but they often sell to already crowded and competitive markets. When we understand that there are different types of innovations, we begin to see how each impact both a company and an economy differently. It turns out that contrary to the conventional wisdom that a society must fix itself, its infrastructure, courts, legislatures, financial markets, and so on, before innovation and growth can take root. Our research at the Christensen Institute suggests that innovation is the process by which a society develops. Innovation funds our infrastructure, cultivates our institution, and mitigates corruption when a country's prosperity stalls. Despite a lot of activity within its borders, that country might not have a development problem. It might have an innovation problem. One of the greatest thinkers of all humanity, Terence McKenna, would agree. He once pointed out that there are no solutions other than technological ones. Dear Professor is essentially saying the same thing. There are no solutions but to innovate. To me, this is a confirmation of a proper level of analysis and the right way of thinking, coming in from both ends and colliding in a spectacular fashion. 2. Data is not the phenomenon. Oh, really? All right. More than ever before, we are awash in data about virtually everything. Data about products, customers, economies, poverty, and progress. We need data. But what does data really tell us? Data, metrics, and statistics, extra points for Oxford comma, are not the phenomena of many of the things we seek to understand. Data simply represents the phenomena. But Substituting data for the phenomenon without truly understanding what is going on underneath that data can lead to devastating outcomes. Consider how it often plays out in corporations. Dell Computers hit its stride in the 90s and quickly became one of the most successful and profitable computer companies in the world. But over time, in an attempt to continually improve its efficiency metrics and financial ratios, such as RONA, the company outsourced many of its operations to a Taiwanese company, ASUS. I've seen the good professor speak on this subject many a times in his videos. It's a fascinating story that you really should have him tell you and show you. So head on over to YouTube and watch it. So I know where this is going. For the uninitiated, RONA is return on net assets. This has everything to do with assets, tangible assets. ASUS kept undercutting Dell to Dell, offering to do the asset management at about 20 to 25% lower than it was costing Dell to manage them at the time. So of course, Dell's like, oh, you want to do our grunt work? Great. And so over time, ASUS kept taking over the asset layers of Dell. And it's just a fascinating story how ASUS ate Dell from the inside, so to speak. Anyways, profitability skyrocketed and Dell analysts rewarded the company accordingly. The data on Dell's balance sheet looked good, but the phenomena behind the data, the innovative prowess of the company, didn't. In 2005, after Dell had outsourced enough activities to ASUS, so now this is going over time, and ASUS has managed to take over multiple layers of assets away from Dell, effectively putting the company into business. ASUS announced the creation of its own brand of computers, and the rest, as they say, became history. All along, the numbers had looked good to Dell, but what the numbers had not shown was the impact these decisions would have on Dell's future. Okay, a little bit more color about what happened. ASUS kept taking over the low invisible layers of Dell's business. The top visible consumer-facing layer of Dell's business, and that is to say Dell as a brand, remained in Dell's possession. But that was about the only thing that remained in Dell's possession. The actual computers, the actual hard assets of Dell were produced by ASUS. Slowly but surely. I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was something like, hey, Dell, don't run your own factory in Taiwan. Use us instead. It'll be cheaper. And Dell's like, oh, thanks, ASUS. That sounds wonderful. And so then ASUS started housing Dell's manufacturing, essentially, and now had the opportunity that said, hey, Dell, don't own the equipment. Use our equipment. It'll be 25% cheaper. And Dell's like, sounds great. And then ASUS now running the factory and owning the equipment that Dells are made on. ASUS went back to Dell and said, hey, Dell, listen, don't buy all these parts from all these different vendors and put them in your chassis. Just, build the outside how you like it. Because, American designers, industrial designers, relish an opportunity to design a new laptop. That's so wonderful. And so ASUS is like, keep that business, under your roof, but let us manage the internal components, the innards of your Dells. We'll handle all the procuring. And we're already putting it in there for you. So, let us just do the procurement for you. It'll cost you 25% less than it does now. And Dell's like, oh my goodness, that sounds wonderful. Notice that all along ASUS is collecting information on the costs that Dell is incurring. ASUS can see how many motherboards arrive at the ASUS factory that then go into Dell's, so they can project. In any case, and then as the novelty of Dell wore off, and the sort of the game became less about distinguishing Dell from other companies similar to Dell, like Gateway, let's say. The game became about commoditizing the brand, selling cheap computers to everyone is what it ultimately became. At which point, ASUS is like, hey, Dell, listen, why pay all those really expensive designers? Forget that. Just let us design. We can do a serviceable job. These are cheap machines that are sold to end Joe Blow. Just let us handle it for you. Look how great we can make it look. It'll cost you 25% less. And Dell's like, sounds great. Yeah, you guys do that dirty work. And now ASUS is sitting on top of Dell Empire, practically speaking. And they can produce, they have all the operations and processes being paid for by Dell. They can produce some extra Dells. And instead of slapping the Dell logo on them, they can put ASUS logo on it. And Bob's your uncle, as they say in Great Britain. So that's the rest of the story that this article is not getting into. That's just so fascinating. I recommend everyone to hop on YouTube, look up Clayton Christensen, watch him talk about this. He does it in several of his videos. You're not going to make a mistake watching any of it. All right. Number 3. Management can be a noble profession. One of the theories that gives great insight on the question, how can I be sure I find happiness in my career? Is that the most powerful motivator in our lives isn't money. It's the opportunity to learn, grow in responsibilities, contribute to others, and be recognized for achievements. Accurate. Over the years, I have told my students about a vision I had while I was running a company I founded before becoming an academic. In my mind's eye, I saw one of my managers leave for work one morning with a relatively strong level of self-esteem. Then I pictured her driving home to her family 10 hours later, feeling unappreciated, frustrated, underutilized, and demeaned. I imagined how profoundly her lowered self-esteem affected the way she interacted with her spouse and her children. The vision that then fast-forwarded to another day when she drove home with greater self-esteem, feeling that she had learned a lot, being recognized for achieving valuable things, and played a significant role in the success of some important initiatives. I then imagined how positively that affected her as a spouse and parent. It was then that it hit me. Management is perhaps the most noble of professions if it is practiced well. No other occupation offers as many ways to help others learn and grow, take responsibility, and be recognized for achievement and contribute to the success of a team. Would it be removing the veil of the matrix to say that management is the good professor's customer? I happen to know that it is. And I suppose we could say that it's really, 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 really useful to think the best of your customer. Management isn't simply about P&L, profit and loss statement, meeting quarterly growth and profitability targets, and creating brand awareness. Those are byproducts of good management. Management is about waking up every day and helping people become better people so they can do better work and live better lives. It's a very sweet sentiment. Number 4, don't reserve your best self only for your career. Amen. Your decisions about where and how you allocate your resources, time, energy, and talent ultimately shape your life's strategy. For me, there are many things that compete for these resources. I'm trying to have a rewarding relationship with my wife and 5 children, contribute to my community, succeed in my career, contribute to my church, and so on. And I have exactly the same problem that a corporation does. How much do I devote to each of these pursuits? Absolutely. These are the questions that we must struggle with in this day and age. Technology has enabled us to leverage our time and be able to, let's say, afford nice things without having to work, let's say, 40 hours a week. And then, so how many hours and on what? These are some really useful questions to ask ourselves. All right, let's see. Allocation choices can make your life turn out to be very different from what you intended. Sometimes that's good. Opportunities that you never planned for emerge. But if you make poor choices about how to invest your resources, the outcome can be bad. When people who have a high need for achievement have an extra half hour of time or an extra ounce of energy, they often unconsciously allocate it to activities that yield the most tangible accomplishments. I agree. I love that the good professor is talking about this, and it's usually I have more editorial pontification to add to the article, but the good professor is so on the money with everything. This is one of the reasons I love his brain so much. And our careers provide the most concrete evidence that we're moving forward. You ship a product, finish a design, complete a presentation, close a sale, get paid or promoted. In contrast, investing time and energy in your relationship with your friends and family typically doesn't offer the same immediate sense of achievement. Kids, for instance, misbehave every day, and it's not until 20-odd years later that you can say, I raised a good kid. You can neglect your relationship with your spouse, and on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't seem as if things are deteriorating. People who are driven to excel have this unconscious propensity to underinvest in their families and overinvest in their careers. I've witnessed nothing but. Even though intimate and loving relationships with their families are the most powerful and enduring source of happiness. Well, yeah, of course, we are stupid. That's our problem. We're just dumb. We go with the flow, and the flow is full flow is like 60 hours a week is what the flow is for mostly everyone. For some of us, this just counts as regular week with a bit of overtime. For some of us, it might include a commute. For some of us, it may not be enough. It might be a 70, 80-hour week. There's plenty of us who do this. We do it without even noticing. We're always on the phone. We're always mobile. If you're always in the work state of mind, when are you in the New York state of mind? When are you in the art state of mind? Where are you in the party state of mind? Where are you in the meditative state of mind? Where are you in the physical state of mind, doing a physical activity? These are all important aspects of our lives that we squeeze in occasionally, even though they rank at least just as high as a career. But the amount of time we spend on career versus these other things would lead an outside observer to say that we give disproportionate time and therefore weight, therefore importance to our careers. Maybe we should chill out a little bit. Okay, 5. God does not hire accountants. Wow, I have no idea where the good professor is going with this. I can't wait to find out. As I've thought about all the things I've accomplished as a Harvard Business School professor, the co-founder of many organizations, and a husband, father, and a friend, I learned one of the most important lessons of my life. God does not hire accountants in heaven. It's interesting to me that he went out of his way to say co-founder of many organizations and not a founder of many organizations. Co-founder is a tricky word to write. You have to make a choice. Do I capitalize it? Do I not? I mean, it is kind of a title. So it could conceivably be capitalized. Then a dash. I've seen it written without a dash. In fact, that's how I write it. And it's not because I decided one day to write it that way. It's because I did a bit of research. And the no dash is a more, let's say, common, accepted way. And I was glad to learn that because I also like the streamlined nature of co-founder without the dash. It's just co-founder. So he may have not given it any thought and just wrote co-founder because that's been the case most of the time. But perhaps it's not about the way the word is written. Perhaps it's about a philosophy, an underlying requirement for doing a company. It could be that. And in fact, I would venture a guess that that's exactly how the good professor intended it. I recognize it because I have a similar rule, or the same rule, in fact. You always want to have a co-founder. I know I do. It's having a co-founder is the pits. It's the worst. The only thing worse than not having a co-founder, to having a co-founder, is not having a co-founder. You saw where I was going with that joke, right? it's important to have a co-founder because it's like that TED Talk where a guy's talking about how to start a dance rave at one of those Coachella type festivals. So there's a guy drunkenly dancing in the field by himself for a little while. And the point of the TED Talk was, well, he's just a crazy loner. But it becomes a party when the second person joins. That, let's say, first follower. Then it becomes a party. Works the same way with startups. Works the same way with companies. A co-founder can provide great balance. So, yeah, I would never want to do a solo thing. Always with a co-founder. But let's get back to the task at hand. God does not hire accountants in heaven. Let's see what that's about. In essence, because human beings have finite minds, we need to aggregate. And so every year we aggregate sales costs and figure out earnings. We aggregate responsibilities, and the person who is responsible for many things is valued as such. The CEO, for instance, is the most valuable person in an organization. It's the way we, finite beings, make sense of all the things going on. But God is different because he has an infinite mind. He does not need to aggregate above the level of an individual. Interesting qualifier. Above the level of an individual. Okay. Clayton always has great frameworks to share. So I'm just pausing here because I think this is going to be great. Okay, let's see. As I thought about this, I realized that the way God would measure my life is different than how we measure each other's. Instead of aggregating all my accomplishments, comparing them with the accomplishments of my friends and colleagues, and then giving me a grade, he would simply want to know how I helped other people. It will not be about my degrees, books, or awards, but about the lives I was able to assist along the way. Why would he have to ask? Wouldn't he already know this? Huh. I'm just accepting Professor's premise here. Solving our toughest problems may not be as simple as asking better questions, but it's certainly the right way to start. This requires us to challenge our assumptions, see the problem through new lenses, and open ourselves to ideas and approaches that may be difficult at first. But as Marcel Proust once said, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Right, you are Marcel Proust. Okay. Wow. Okay, so what are we to make of Professor's article? Let's see. I already knew from extensive familiarity with the good professor about the whole Dell computer thing. And so what was new in here? Well, he did aggregate a lot of he aggregated his 25 years. Okay, that's mission accomplished. Hey, how often is the headline accurate? So an aggregate version of 25 years of innovation is there are different types of innovation. So this is good news for those who work at corporations, not every corporation is forward thinking and has, let's say, an entrepreneurial track or a department, crackerjack team. Few guys in the basement thinking up new things, so not every corporation is going to have that. Resources and hands-free at your disposal. Things of that nature. So you may not be able to innovate in terms of new products, but there are processes that can be innovated upon that have to do with efficiency. What were the three? There was a market, sustaining, and efficiency, right? Data is not the phenomenon. I've been soft on data from the get-go. When big data became big data, 2013, I'd say. It's been 10 years we've been collecting and using big data, and then it became a thing. It's kind of like Bitcoin. It's how everything works, right? So having big data experience, 2006, 2010, I would say I was steeped in big data. The amount of data was never the problem. What computers can do with it was never the problem. We haven't innovated much along these dimensions. Artificial intelligence, again, just like the thing that we've been doing for in earnest 10 years prior to it becoming a buzzword, and 100 years prior to that, in effect. Extending all the way back to Roman times. I mean, rotate 13 was one of the algorithms used by Romans. And so this was an encryption algorithm. It took the alphabet and it just moved characters around by 13 places. So if you want to use, say, letter I in a sentence, you just go down the alphabet 13 places and find whatever word that is or letter that is. And then you just reverse it when you receive it. You have to agree upon the type of encryption. So it doesn't have to be 13. It could be rotate 5 or rotate, I guess up to however many characters you have. I guess even beyond that. Why not? So, yeah, data is not a phenomenon. I agree. The Asus Dell story is just so educational. Glad he brought it up. Management as a noble profession. Sure. Yeah, don't reserve the best of yourself for your career. God does not hire accountants. Yeah, so what was... Okay. There are a couple of statements here that really have a certain sustaining value for me. God does not hire accountants in heaven. the individual level, we aggregate responsibility, and the person who's responsible. Where is it? Right. God doesn't hire accountants. Aggregating at the level of an individual. In this thing, for me, the meat and potatoes of this article are really all in the number 5. I wholeheartedly agree with this and embrace it. So that was nothing new. Management can be a noble profession. It's I suppose what really struck me is that developing an appreciation for your customer is a really, really, really good thing. I've known about Delenasis. That's just super interesting. And not all right. And there's different types of innovations. So if you're in a corporation, you can innovate at the level of analysis of efficiency or sustainability. It's one way to get your innovation on. Let's play comment roulette and see what we land on. Let's see. Okay. The words in this article are profound. My takeaway was to challenge our assumptions, see the problem through new lenses, and open ourselves to ideas and approaches that may be difficult at first. I am reminded of the letter Paul wrote to the Romans and said, "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." All right. That's a real solid comment there, David. Let's see. Let's see. Great article, of course. One request. God may not hire accountants, but finite beings do, and what gets measured gets managed. As long as we focus on endless growth and purely financial measures of success, that's what we'll get, along with many negative, unintended, largely unmeasured consequences. But don't blame the accountants. They just measure what CEOs and regulators oh, she must be an accountant. The capitalist's dilemma started to address these issues at the company level, but I think it will take a global cross-sector approach. Perhaps your next project will be a global economy society version of how will you measure your life. Oh, interesting comment, Denise. I didn't think Professor was blaming accountants for anything, but whatever. Oh, yeah, I agree with Himanshu here. Human beings have finite minds. That is really something to meditate on and to realize that the journey is from finite to infinite. Israfil liked management is about waking up every day and helping people become better people so they can do better work and live better lives. Fabulous. Let's see, what else? Let's load a few more comments and see if we can strike comment gold. All right, so there's been some back and forth. Let's explore this. Powerful statement. The most powerful motivator in our lives isn't money. It's the opportunity to learn, grow in responsibilities, contribute to others. and be recognized for achievements. Ownership is key in culture of innovation. Dare to give your employees ownership of their own ideas and innovation. Okay? And then Michael, who's been tagged. Indeed, research shows that monetized rewards for employees for their ideas have an opposite effect. Instead of getting energized by new ideas or innovation, thus the opportunity to improve oneself or the organization, employees get dissatisfied by feeling that they miss out on money. Ownership and recognition are the prime motivators. Should we tackle this? What are we talking about here? Motivation. We're talking about motivation. They're specifically talking about motivating employees, incentivizing them in a gamified fashion. All right, I'm a big fan of gamification. Gamification has proven to be effective. Here's what's interesting. We could and we should approach running a business, running a company, running almost anything, doing almost anything. We could and probably should approach it at the level of game. This seems to be the right level of analysis. Being invited to work for a company is not unlike being invited to engage in a game. Do you want to play that game? People enjoy games. They can win. They enjoy games they are struggling to win at their level of expertise. And most importantly, and this is where we fail, most importantly, the rules of the game must be known to all. That's what makes the difference. Most companies, however, they have not articulated the game. The games are being played, but everyone's playing different games. Not everyone's playing the same game, let's say. This is detrimental to the business because if we disembody the business as its own entity that happens to be filled with corporeal beings such as us, what I, as a business, discorporated, want from the corporate bodies that make me up, I want them to play the same game. I want them to know the score. I want them to know the rules. But most importantly, I want them all to play the same game. Perhaps I haven't communicated the rules. And perhaps I've somehow managed to impose the rules of the game without articulating them. This happens a lot. You know, many sales departments uh, get motivated by vacations in Hawaii, and a second place gets a toy teacup set. It's supposed to be humiliating to come in second. And so that's kind of a game where rules are known and ways to win are clear, at least from a reward perspective, not necessarily from the process perspective. There are other ways in which companies get away with not having to articulate the game, and yet getting everyone or most to play it accurately. Social conditioning and social norms and peer pressure plays a big and important role in this. Is ownership and recognition prime motivators? I don't even think that ownership and recognition is the proper level of analysis. What do you think?